You know, you might feel a pinch of rising costs, maybe the weight of confusing regulations. But have you ever really stopped to think about just how deeply government policy impacts your daily life?
It really does. From
Yeah,
your doctor's office to your kid's classroom, even things happening halfway across the world.
exactly. And decisions made in Washington, they ripple through everything. We're talking billions in taxpayer dollars. And, well, policies that critics in these documents argue are failing the very people they claim to help.
Hmm.
In fact, a recent report reveals a pretty startling statistic. Only 17% of Americans trust the government to do what's right most of the time. Just 17%.
Wow, that's so.
It is. So, what if there was a comprehensive blueprint for reform? One aiming to give you more control, cut waste, and maybe strengthen America's standing. Today, we're unpacking exactly that, digging into a stack of documents outlining a specific conservative vision.
A vision that challenges the status quo offers a dramatically different path forward.
Get ready to rethink what's possible when we challenge government overreach and put individual liberty back at the center of American policy. That's the pitch, anyway.
Right.
So our mission today, dive deep into these documents. We're focusing on three key areas they outline: personalized healthcare, accountable governance, and empowering American workers.
And we'll also explore how taxpayer funds are scrutinized in some pretty controversial areas mentioned in these sources.
Absolutely. Let's start with healthcare. We need to unpack the core arguments presented against the current system. The sources, specifically from the Republican Study Committee, they call the Affordable Care Act, the ACA, an unprecedented level of federal intervention.
Yeah, they talk about thousands of pages of text, hundreds of complicated provisions, and importantly, trillions of dollars in new spending and taxes. That's the claim.
And the critique goes further, right?
Yeah.
Highlighting broken promises.
It does. The documents emphasize how promises like, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan, reportedly weren't kept. PolitiFact even called one claim lie of the year. And they give examples, like a Michigan family whose private plan got canceled. They ended up, according to the source, with a new plan, huge $10,200 out-of-pocket max, and mandated coverage they didn't even want, like abortion.
And disabled individuals reportedly paying more.
That's what the source suggests, yeah. Absorbing higher costs.
So if the stated goal was affordability, what do these documents say went wrong?
Well, they point to data. Like in 2016, apparently only half of civil households had even $2,000 saved for unexpected medical costs.
That's not much buffer.
Not at all. And for millennials, 6 out of 10 couldn't handle a $1,000 emergency. The outcome, the documents argue, is that 1 in 5 Americans end up postponing or just canceling health care because of the cost.
And specific regulations are blamed too.
Right. Things like guaranteed issue, meaning insurers can't deny you for pre-existing conditions. The argument in the documents is that this incentivizes people to wait until they're sick to buy insurance.
Which drives up costs for everyone else.
That's the claim, yeah. Driving costs to exorbitant levels. And they say many insurers just left the market. Over 2/3 of communities ended up with 2 or fewer carriers, and more than a third had only one.
Like Pamela in Nebraska you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Lost 6 plans, the source says, and now faces these really high premiums from the single carrier left.
And it's not just private insurance holders. What about Medicaid?
The source claims that since the ACA, over 21,900 individuals on Medicaid waiting lists died in states that expanded Medicaid.
Wow.
And over 700,000 are still waiting for home and community-based services. So the critique is pretty broad.
Okay, so given all that criticism, what's the proposed path forward in this conservative playbook?
The vision is summarized as a system that protects the vulnerable, empowers patients, and personalizes care.
Empowering patients. How?
A big piece is significantly expanding health savings accounts, HSAs. The idea is to let more people contribute, like working seniors, folks on Medicare, TRICARE, VA, Indian Health Service.
So more people could have these tax-advantaged savings accounts for healthcare.
Precisely. And converting balances from FSAs and HRAs, protecting HSA funds in bankruptcy. But there's a key condition mentioned.
Which is?
These HSAs would need to be pro-life, meaning they couldn't be linked to plans that cover abortions or be used for abortion-related expenses, according to the proposal.
Interesting. And what about making actual care more affordable beyond savings accounts?
The documents highlight state-level actions. Maine, for example, used specific waivers under the ACA itself, Section 1332, to create reinsurance programs.
Reinsurance, like insurance for insurance companies.
Sort of, yeah. Helps cover really high-cost claims. The argument is that this lowered premiums by 12–15% and even more with some other regulatory tweaks.
So using existing mechanisms differently.
Exactly. And they also propose right-sizing Medicaid. They note federal spending ballooned from $14 billion in 1980 to $375 billion in 2017, projected to hit $702 billion by 2029.
Huge numbers.
Right. So the focus is on a sustainable safety net, pushing back against what they call a government-run, one-size-fits-all system that they contend could mean higher taxes, lower quality, and long waits.
Okay, so if the healthcare vision is about empowering individuals and shifting away from centralized control, how does that translate to government itself? That 17% trust number is still hanging there.
Right. The documents suggest that this low trust is fueled by an expanding administrative state, what some might call bureaucracy,
Yeah.
and maybe a resistance to common sense reform.
And there are specific examples of inefficiency.
Oh, yeah. The GEAR Task Force Government Efficiency Accountability Reform points to things like federal property management. In FY 2016, agencies apparently owned over 3,000 vacant buildings and almost 8,000 partially empty ones.
But they can't just sell them easily.
Apparently not. Bureaucratic processes limit their sale, according to the source. Wasted assets, essentially.
What about infrastructure? We always hear about delays.
That's another target. The documents state these delays have a tangible cost to job growth. They propose streamlining permits, like a 2-year deadline for agencies.
And changing environmental reviews?
Yes, ending the requirement under NEPA for applicants to account for every single alternative. They argue it just bogs things down.
And then there's the spending they call wasteful.
Right. The D.C. streetcar project gets called out over $200 million, described as highly inefficient and comically unpopular.
Ouch! Any other examples?
They mention grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities and Arts for things they deem questionable, like an all-dog performance of Hamlet.
Seriously?
That's what the source cites. And they criticize international programs, too, like the Sea Grant program or the UNDP, calling them duplicative or lacking oversight. They even cite auditors finding millions misappropriated within UNDP funds for Russia.
So, efficiency, cutting waste. What about the people working in government?
That's covered, too. Did you know, according to these documents, it takes over 300 days on average to remove a, quote, toxic federal worker?
300 days. That seems long.
Very. The proposed Merit Act aims to cut that down to 30 days. The underlying question raised is, how can government be efficient if managing its own workforce is so difficult?
And compensation comes up as well.
It does. The report states federal employees get, on average, 17% more in total compensation than private sector counterparts.
No.
That costs taxpayers, they claim, $31 billion a year and potentially incentivizes poor performance.
And unions.
They advocate for the National Right to Work Act, noting unions reportedly sent over $1.3 billion to liberal advocacy groups between 2010 and 2017, allegedly without specific employee permission for those political uses.
Okay, let's shift gears now. From domestic issues to the global stage, how does this conservative blueprint address threats and America's role?
It outlines significant concerns, particularly regarding Iran, China, and Russia. Iran is described very starkly the world's most prolific sponsor of terrorism, pursuing nukes, seeking Israel's destruction.
And the criticism is aimed at past policy.
Yes, specifically criticizing the Obama administration's approach as overly restrained, arguing it sacrificed Middle East policy and didn't enforce red lines.
What kind of influence are they citing?
Iran's support for the Houthi militia in Yemen, arming Shia militias in Syria and Iraq. One expert quoted calls it the largest Shia militant force ever assembled.
Strong words.
They also call for cutting all taxpayer funding to the Lebanese armed forces because of alleged Hezbollah and Iranian influence there.
And then there's China. The documents seem quite critical.
Extremely. They detail concerns about Xi Jinping consolidating power, removing term limits, plus totalitarian censorship, surveillance, and this sinicization of religion in places like Xinjiang and Tibet.
Forcing conformity, basically.
That's the implication. And they also point to China's COVID-19 disinformation, like blaming the U.S. military.
So what actions do they propose?
Things like amending the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, the FSIA, so U.S. courts could hear cases against Chinese companies for IP theft.
Holding them accountable in court.
Right. Also sanctioning specific officials like Chen Quanguo, who is called the architect of China's Muslim camps, for human rights abuses. and practical steps like banning firms like Huawei and ZTE from hiring former civil servants with security clearances to fight economic espionage.
Okay, a lot on the global front. Let's bring it back home now. How do these policies aim to empower the American worker? You, in your career, your financial life.
Well, one area is early education. The American Worker Task Force proposes transforming the $10.6 billion Head Start program
Transforming how?
into a state-run voucher program for low-income families. The goal stated is giving parents more choice in whether kids get early education.
And what about higher education?
They challenge what they term the bachelor's or bust mindset. The argument is that this focus drives up tuition, saddles students with debt, and maybe creates low-value university programs.
They give an example.
Yeah, they cite Harvard's tuition, nearly $50,000, even during remote learning, as an example of high cost, potentially disconnected from value.
So what's the alternative approach suggested?
Embracing private lending, more for education. The idea is to reduce the federal government's sort of monopoly and better align what's taught with actual labor market needs.
Connecting schools and employers more directly?
Exactly. Requiring accreditation boards to include business representatives so students gain skills that are actually in demand. Making education more practical, essentially.
Makes sense. What about flexibility in the workplace itself?
The Working Families Flexibility Act is proposed. It would give employees the option that's key of taking compensatory time off instead of overtime pay.
So choosing time or money based on their needs.
That's the idea, empowering individual choice.
And finally, welfare reform. That's often part of these discussions.
Yes. The vision presented is to reimagine welfare to empower individuals and families, with a strong emphasis on encouraging work over dependency.
Specific changes mentioned.
Reducing the 12% discretionary waiver allotment for SNAP-P, the food stamp program. Also, rethinking the Housing First policy for homelessness.
Why rethink housing first?
The argument presented is that it sometimes places recovering addicts right next door to active users without addressing the underlying issues like addiction or unemployment that might be keeping them homeless.
Okay. Now, we need to address some of the most, let's say, politically charged content in these sources. It deals directly with Planned Parenthood.
Right. And it's important we just report what the documents allege here. They raise significant concerns about the organization's funding, its practices, and even its historical roots.
What are the core claims about current operations?
The source claims Planned Parenthood facilitated a record number of abortions, 402,200 in 2023-24, while receiving $800 million in taxpayer funding. That works out to over $2 million a day.
And critics are cited.
Yes, groups like Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America are quoted alleging that pregnant women visiting Planned Parenthood are, quote, sold an abortion 97% of the time. They claim other services like prenatal care or adoption referrals are a minuscule minority.
And there have been political efforts related to this.
The documents detail attempts by Republicans, like Senators Ernst and Paul, to investigate and defund the organization, particularly focusing on COVID relief funds, PPP money, that was reportedly used for abortions.
And President Trump took action.
Yes, he's noted as having revoked an Obama-era rule that stops states from blocking funding to Planned Parenthood, which, the source notes, performs over 300,000 abortions annually.
There were also some controversial videos mentioned.
Yes, the reports highlight allegations from undercover videos made by the Center for Medical Progress. These videos purportedly show Planned Parenthood officials discussing, quote, financial incentive to sell aborted fetal body parts.
Selling body parts, that sounds illegal.
Federal law is complex here, but the videos allegedly show discussions of payments up to $1,500 and even descriptions of altering procedures to obtain intact organs, potentially violating partial birth abortion laws. The source cites 28 senators urging the DOJ to investigate descriptions of infants born alive being left to die or killed via organ harvesting.
These are very serious allegations.
Extremely serious, yes. And again, these are the claims presented in the source material.
The documents also make claims about other health services, like mammograms.
Right. The source claims Planned Parenthood runs 0 licensed mammogram facilities, contradicting, they say, the organization's own statements, and even statements by figures like President Obama suggesting they provide them.
And a former president of Planned Parenthood is mentioned.
Dr. Leana Wen. She was reportedly ousted, according to the source, because she tried to depoliticize the group and focus more broadly on health care rather than primarily on abortion rights advocacy.
Okay, beyond current practices, the sources delve into history.
They do, quite extensively, focusing on the founder, Margaret Sanger, and her ties to the eugenics movement. She's described in the documents as a racist white woman who advocated for forced sterilization.
Strong language.
Very. The source quotes Sanger materials, where she apparently sought to exterminate the Negro population and referred to Aboriginal Australians as the lowest known species. These are direct, though highly controversial claims made in the documents about her views.
And specific projects are cited.
Yes, Sanger's Negro Project from 1939. The source alleges she sought black ministers to help promote birth control in the black community, quoting her as saying, "We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population."
How is this historical context linked to the present day in the documents?
They connect it to current racial disparities in abortion rates. Citing CDC stats, they note African Americans are about 13% of the population, but account for 30% of abortions.
Are there state-specific examples?
Yes. In Georgia, the source states African American women are 32% of the population, but account for over 62% of abortions. They also cite the Guttmacher Institute as saying black women are 5 times more likely than white women to have an abortion.
And facility locations are mentioned.
The reports allege that 80% of abortion facilities are in minority neighborhoods, and that Planned Parenthood clinics specifically tend to cluster in low-income or high-minority areas.
And a final stark statistic.
The source claims 14 million black babies have been aborted since Roe v. Wade, equating that number, they say, to 1/3 of the current black population. Again, a claim made within these conservative documents.
Okay, we've certainly covered a lot of ground here. We've taken a comprehensive look at the specific conservative framework for America, from personalized healthcare, cutting government waste, empowering workers, confronting global threats.
And examining those deep-seated, often controversial issues around organizations like Planned Parenthood, all is presented in these source documents.
Right. This deep dive has really shown us how a focus on individual liberty, fiscal responsibility, and a strong national stance is proposed to shape policy across the board in this particular vision.
So here's something to think about. If trust in government really is down at just 17%, what concrete steps, if any, do you believe are most crucial for leaders to maybe rebuild that trust? How can they demonstrate true accountability and genuinely empower individuals, not just institutions?